You're not here by accident. If you found yourself drawn to this, it's because there's a part of you that already knows you are different, set apart for something greater. As it is written, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last. John 15 verse 16, when you feel like life is pushing you toward challenges others don't seem to face, or when you sense that your path is unexplainably heavy yet purposeful, it's no coincidence. These moments are the universe whispering that you are chosen. Let's dive into what this truly means and why your journey holds the key to something extraordinary. Karma is like that invisible clock that no one knows when it will chime, but when it does, it's precise. Often, manipulators believe they are in control, taking advantage of situations or innocent people, convinced they will never be caught. However, the universe doesn't work on human immediacy, it operates with precision. Imagine a chess player who, while celebrating an early victory, doesn't see the checkmate coming from behind. This is how karma works, acting at the most unexpected yet perfectly timed moment. These traps of time of karma can be seen in everyday life. Consider the boss who mistreats employees and, years later, finds themselves dependent on the very people they once mistreated. Or the friend who betrays someone's trust and, when they need support, discovers the bridges have been burned. The lesson here is simple: what you put out into the world returns with interest. So what should you do? Always plant good deeds, even when no one is watching. The most interesting thing is that karma also teaches manipulators a subtle lesson: the apparent power they wield is illusory. They might celebrate momentary victories, but the reversal comes, bringing painful reflections. And for those who were victims, there is an equally valuable lesson: time doesn't erase wounds, but it adjusts accounts. What seemed like injustice can later be recognized as a calculated move of the cosmic balance. Now, the impact of this justice starts to deepen. Innocence, though often mistaken for fragility, is a surprisingly powerful force. It creates an invisible field of protection, like armor that can't be seen but is felt. Manipulators, in attempting to exploit this quality, often fail to realize that innocence is like a mirror: the evil they project returns multiplied. It's almost a paradox: the more they try to destroy someone's purity, the more exposed they become to the consequences. A practical example of this is the child who, even when intimidated by older peers, wins the sympathy and protection of those around them. Their vulnerability awakens a sense of justice in those who observe. Similarly, in the adult world, innocent people often find allies in unexpected places. Have you noticed how honest and genuine people, even if they seem alone, attract help when they need it most? The lesson here is clear: preserving authenticity is one of the most underestimated forms of self-protection. When innocence is violated, what manipulators don't realize is that they are removing their own defense. Like a castle that tears down its own walls, by attacking someone unprotected, they pave the way for their actions to reach them without barriers. This sets in motion a dynamic of vulnerability that, sooner or later, comes with a cost. Karma, as mentioned earlier, becomes even fiercer when innocence is involved. And when the cosmic debt accumulates, the repercussions become impossible to ignore. In addition, innocence carries a transformative power that goes beyond mere protection. Those who attempt to exploit it often underestimate its ability to inspire empathy and compassion in others. It's like a flower growing in hard soil: even the most skeptical cannot ignore its beauty and quiet strength. Many acts of kindness stem precisely from the desire to protect what remains pure in a world that constantly tries to corrupt. Finally, those who live with genuine integrity, even facing manipulation or abuse, connect with a greater truth. Innocence, in its essence, is a reflection of the purity of the universe, and to touch it with negative intentions is like going against an unstoppable current. Manipulators, by breaking this balance, not only face external resistance but also the disintegration of their own internal defenses. And, in this cycle, something greater is revealed. Every manipulated act leaves a trace, and this trace turns into a cosmic debt that no one can avoid. It's like taking out a loan that, at the moment, seems advantageous, but whose interest accumulates silently. When someone acts unjustly or harms another, an imbalance is created that the universe inevitably corrects. No matter how hard someone tries to escape, this debt finds a way to be collected. And, curiously, the payment often proves to be much heavier than the original benefit. This principle is easy to see in everyday examples. Imagine someone who lies to obtain a promotion at work. For a time, it might seem like they've beaten the system, but eventually, the effects of that dishonesty start to surface: colleagues' lack of trust, mistakes they can't rectify, and even the loss of the very position they desired. So what should one do? Live with integrity, even in the smallest actions. Even avoiding little lies in daily life is a good start. The universe operates like a perfect accounting system. Each injustice, no matter how small, enters this cosmic book. And, curiously, the return often comes in unexpected ways. A manipulator who steals peace from others might end up dealing with devastating internal conflicts. It's as if the universe says, "You took something that wasn't yours, now you must return it, and with interest." It's not punishment but a natural adjustment, a restoration of balance. Another way to see this dynamic is to understand that nothing in the universe is wasted. Energy, intentions, actions, everything circulates and returns. When someone tries to enrich or gain at the expense of another, the energy that was unjustly taken starts to corrode the manipulator themselves. It's like planting a seed in poisoned soil. The fruit, inevitably, will be bitter. That's why the greatest gift someone can give themselves is to act with integrity and compassion, even when no one is watching. And there's something even more intriguing: this debt not only corrodes the manipulator but also strengthens the person who was wronged, creating a cycle of learning and overcoming. Thus, someone who seeks to deceive, in fact, paves the path to their own imbalance. And as the unbalanced energy begins to manifest more intensely, another inevitable phenomenon takes shape. You know that feeling when you've done something wrong and things start falling apart? Well, manipulation works somewhat like that. When someone tries to control others, the energy they use to do this doesn't disappear, it simply returns to the one who sent it. And when it returns, it can be much more intense. It's like throwing a boomerang full of negativity. You think you're winning, but the energy you stole will turn against you in ways you can't even imagine. Imagine the boss who always makes others feel small to maintain power. On the outside, they may think they're in control, but what happens underneath? That heavy energy of fear and distrust begins to spread, and they'll be the first to feel the consequences. Maybe they'll lose their peace of mind, or even start losing the trust of their own team. And believe me, this won't last long. What can you do? It's better to focus on being someone who inspires trust, without resorting to manipulation to stay on top. And here's more: the effect of the backlash of energy isn't something that appears just next week. It may start off subtly, growing discomfort, a feeling of drifting away from people, or even an emptiness that seems unfillable. But the fact is, sooner or later, the energy you've emitted comes back to you much more intensely. Manipulators usually don't notice this wave coming until it has already caused damage. And when this tide of negative energy arrives, it might be too late to do anything about it. Now, if you can realize that our actions generate an exchange of energy, everything changes. Living with pure intentions and good vibes is the best remedy to avoid this kind of comeback. Honestly, who doesn't want a peaceful life where energies flow naturally, without obstacles? Instead of getting involved in manipulative games, the secret is to invest in good relationships and actions that truly contribute around you. This, my friend, creates a field of energy that spreads to everyone, without weighing down or causing pressure. And when you realize this, those trying to manipulate will start to notice something even deeper. You know when someone thinks they're winning, but deep down, they're just fooling themselves? It may seem like the person is crushing it, getting everything they wanted and receiving applause, but deep down, everything they've built is like a house of cards. It looks beautiful until someone blows on it. And when the truth comes to light, everything crumbles. Their victory ends up turning into a huge disappointment. Imagine that guy who loves to brag about what they have or what they've accomplished, but deep down, no one knows it's all a lie. They may seem like the personification of success, but just give it time and the truth will start to surface, and then the mask falls off. What seemed like a victory becomes a defeat, and the worst part, they lose the trust of those around them. The secret is simple: victories based on deception don't last. They always fall when we least expect it. The most curious thing is that these illusory victories don't just deceive others, they deceive the manipulator themselves. They start believing their own lies so much that, after telling them repeatedly, they begin to think everything is true. But when reality knocks on the door, they no longer know where they are. And no matter how hard they try, the lie will never bring true satisfaction. Deep down, they know they're empty. So, instead of chasing a false victory, how about achieving something real? Something that doesn't require lies or tricks. When you build your victory authentically, the foundation is solid. And unlike a house of cards, it only grows and strengthens you. That's what truly matters, a real victory that takes you further and further. And when you begin to build something real, without lies, you'll realize there's something even more powerful behind it. When someone manipulates, the first victim is the person trying to control. No matter how much they try to hide it, guilt starts to seep in. At first, they might ignore it, but gradually, this feeling begins to grow, tightening like a pair of shoes that are too small. The person starts feeling uncomfortable with themselves, to the point where they can no longer deny that something is wrong. The conscience always finds a way to surface. Now, paranoia is the result of this. As guilt grows, the person starts seeing enemies in every corner. They feel like they're being watched, like people are noticing their actions, even when that's not happening. Every glance is suspicious, every word has a second meaning. This constant fear of being exposed creates a mental prison. And the more they try to escape, the more the paranoia takes over. Imagine that person who constantly lies to protect themselves, but in reality, they're digging themselves into a deeper hole. Each lie generates more lies, and soon they no longer know which version is true. What was once an attempt to control turns into a mental nightmare. And when this happens, paranoia takes over, leaving the person completely disconnected from reality. This is all a reflection of how the conscience imposes itself. No matter how hard you try to suffocate it, the truth always finds a way to surface. And for the manipulator, this truth is the guilt, which gradually corrodes them. So, the great key here is to learn to live honestly. The more you live according to your principles, the more peaceful your heart will be. And when you start to free yourself from this heavy load of guilt and paranoia, you'll realize that when someone begins to manipulate, the impact isn't just restricted to the victim. The energy they emit will affect everyone around them. Have you noticed how a heavy, deceit-filled environment starts to push people away? It's like a stone thrown into a lake, the ripples spread, affecting all relationships around it. And the worst part, those who can't see what's happening will start to drift away without even realizing why. Imagine a friend who always tries to pull the strings and control others. At first, people might even give in, but over time, they start feeling uncomfortable. A person who manipulates begins to lose the trust of those closest to them. Friends and colleagues slowly start to pull away, not wanting to be around someone who always tries to manipulate everything. This chain reaction weakens relationships and creates a cycle of loneliness for the one manipulating. And the impact doesn't stop there. When someone starts using others for their benefit, they weaken their own connections. Instead of building relationships based on trust, they create a web of empty, fragile relationships. Those around them begin to realize that the relationship is one-sided, and soon they feel exhausted or deceived. This only generates more loneliness for the manipulator, pushing away those who could truly help them grow. The key to breaking this cycle is creating relationships based on genuine reciprocity. Instead of manipulating, it's more effective to invest in true relationships where everyone helps each other and grows together. This strengthens not only the connections but also mutual trust. If you build your circle with honesty and sincerity, the return will always be positive. And when this happens, the energy around you becomes something entirely different. It's curious how, often, those who try to manipulate end up creating an even greater force in those they try to manipulate. You know that person who seems like an easy target, but in the end, grows and transforms into someone much stronger? Manipulation, instead of breaking them, ends up being what drives their evolution. The manipulator tries to control and dominate, but that's exactly when the game turns. By trying to suppress, they end up awakening a power within the other person that they didn't even know they had. Imagine that situation where someone constantly undermines another person's confidence, telling them they're not good enough. What the manipulator doesn't realize is that instead of weakening the victim, they're creating the strength necessary for that person to rebel and show what they are truly capable of. Those cruel words end up being the fuel for a wake-up call of self-confidence and self-sufficiency. And when this happens, the person begins to understand the power they've always had, but never could see. This effect is more common than it seems. Those who try to control and diminish others often end up creating a monster, in the good sense. The manipulated person, going through difficulties, learns valuable lessons that, without that forced push, they might never have learned. Instead of being crushed, they reconfigure and become much more resilient and wise. This ends up generating an internal transformation that no one can take away. So, if you're being manipulated, instead of feeling defeated, see it as an opportunity for growth. What seems like an attack can actually be a springboard for your awakening. The key is to perceive what you are gaining from this experience. And, as you strengthen yourself, you will realize that there is something much more powerful by your side, your true strength. Life has an interesting way of showing us that, when we don't learn, the cycle comes back. The manipulator might think they're getting away with it for a while, but soon they'll realize they're stuck in a loop. Every time they try to control the situation, they attract more problems. It seems like life just finds a way to bring everything back, no matter how much they try to escape. What seemed like a solution ends up being just another weight to carry. It's as if the universe were a mirror, reflecting everything the manipulator tries to hide. The flaws don't just appear externally. They begin to show up within the person as well. They start to feel discomfort, you know? As if the peace and tranquility they once had are slipping away. And the most curious part is that instead of conquering, they start losing everything they've built. The game they thought they were winning is actually just another cycle of failure. And what they don't realize is that, instead of controlling, they're being controlled by their own behavior. The big issue is that if the person doesn't change, they'll keep finding themselves in the same place, facing the same situations. You know that saying, those who don't listen, feel? Well, that's it. Every time the manipulator tries to push the responsibility away, they sink deeper into their own mistake. Until a point comes where life won't give them any margin to escape unscathed. But to get out of this, they need to look inside and admit what needs to change. Once that happens, the cycle begins to break. And if they don't change, well, they'll keep going through this loop until they learn the lesson. But if they can take a step back and see where they went wrong, life will start giving them new opportunities. Because the truth is, change doesn't come from outside, but from within. So, if you're in this cycle, know that the key is to change your attitude, break the pattern, and stop hiding. The world will start opening up, but the first move needs to come from you. Now that you understand how divine justice and karma work, I want you to stop and think, how does this apply to your life? What have you been sowing so far? Because, believe me, what you plant is what you'll reap. So, what do you choose to sow? Good intentions, honesty, and integrity, or deception and manipulation? The key is to take responsibility for your actions, understanding that you are not above the laws of the universe. And don't forget, change starts with you. And, of course, you knew you could start now, right? You don't have to wait for karma to fix your actions. On the contrary, you can take the reins of your life and start changing today. Have you ever wondered how your choices can positively impact your life? What steps can you take to start planting good seeds right now? Let's talk about this in the comments. I want to know your reflections. If you felt that this content made sense to you, then you know what to do. Subscribe to the channel and activate the notifications. The transformation journey you've started here will continue, and I want to be with you every step of the way. Let's go together, because there's still much more to learn and apply.